JD Vance went on Portal podcast in 2020. That is Eric Weinstein's podcast.
That's the podcast where Eric Weinstein and Sam Harris called Sam Seder a psychopath.
Oh,
I think in episode 3 maybe. So check
was
that
this
out.
when they tried to get you fired, or was that Brett?
That was earlier. That was Brett. Yeah.
Okay.
Eric has not acknowledged my existence, much to my chagrin at this point.
Wait, okay, but is Brett the one who has a new podcast with his wife now, or is that
Dark
Eric?
Horse. No, that's Brett.
Okay.
Yeah. Eric is is slightly more sane because he said that the vaccine is safe because of Israel gave it to its citizens.
Right.
And Israel's inherently moral. I don't know if you heard about this,
They're
Brandon.
inherently moral, or if there was a population control secret conspiracy, they would know about it and
they would
wouldn't
be
subject
doing
their own
it.
citizens to it.
They'd be doing it to the Palestinians, not preventing them from getting the vaccine, which was what was
Exactly.
happening at the time.
Which, frankly, not the worst logic in the world. Better than his brother's logic, anyway.
A little bit, but it's still working backwards from a childlike, fantastical notion about what Israel actually means. But putting that aside for a second, he's also the managing director of Peter Thiel's Thiel Capital. What a coincidence that J.D. Vance, Peter Thiel acolyte, went on this podcast. And this is what he had to say in 2020. It's making the rounds about, quote, post-menopausal females.
And you can sort of see the effect it has on him to be around them. Like, they spoil him. There's sort of all the classic stuff that grandparents do to grandchildren.
Talking about his son.
But it makes him a much better human being to have exposure to his grandparents.
Well, I don't know.
And the evidence on this, by the way, is like super clear.
That's the whole purpose of the postmenopausal
Yes.
female in theory. Did your in-laws, and particularly your mother-in-law, show up in some huge way?
She lived with us for a year.
Right.
So, you know.
So I didn't know the answer to that.
Right. No,
because that's this weird unadvertised feature of marrying an Indian woman.
So it's in some ways the most transgressive thing I've ever done against sort of the hyper neoliberal approach to work and family. My wife had this baby 7 weeks before she started the clerkship. It was still not sleeping any more than an hour and a half in a given interval. And her mom just took a sabbatical. She's a biology professor in California. Just took a sabbatical for a year and came and lived with us and took care of our kid for a year.
Okay,
and
so
it was just one of these things where it's like, this is what you do.
So a biology professor, PhD,
Yes.
drops what they're doing
Yeah.
to immediately tend to the needs
Yeah.
of a new mother with her infant.
Painfully economically inefficient. Right?
Can I just propose?
Why didn't she just keep her job, give us part of the wages to pay somebody else to do it, right? Because that is the thing that the hyper liberalized economics wants you to do. The
Women in the
economic
workplace.
logic of always prioritizing paid wage labor over other forms of contributing to a society is to me, it's actually a consequence of a sort of fundamental liberalism that is ultimately going to unwind and collapse upon itself. I think it's the abandonment of a sort of Aristotelian virtue politics for a hyper market-oriented way of thinking about what's good and what's desirable. If people are paying for it and it contributes to GDP and it makes the economic consumption numbers rise, then it's good. And if it doesn't, it's bad. I think that entire sort of, to me, that's sort of the root of our political problem.
Okay.
And
So he agrees actually there with Weinstein saying the postmenopausal female point. But this is the thing where J.D. Vance and the right, they gesture towards the fact that, like, childcare is extremely expensive and it's totally messed up that we don't have a federalized system of childcare, which is, by the way, something that Kamala Harris ran on in the primary in 2020 and seems to be gesturing towards the fact that she might be pushing for that as a part of her platform in terms of making childcare more affordable on the federal level. It's something that Tim Walz also was a part of in Minnesota. Like, our critique of the fact that childcare is so expensive is the fact that, like, no, we should have a federal program to make sure that children can be taken care of.
And it's not
his critique is that women are outside the home, including the postmenopausal females that should be in the home, and we need to be increasing prosperity through basically the marketplace for men to be able to make more money, even though none of this, there's no way that could be achieved given our economic framework.
It's not just federal daycare, it is also parental leave policy.
Yeah.
So that if this is such a bourgeois conversation, this is how you know this guy has no like the roots that he supposedly speaks from. No, this is a Yale guy who married somebody who clerked for Supreme Court justices and works for Peter Thiel and talks with people who work for Peter Thiel. Because the idea that like people have this choice. No, most people don't have a choice to say, actually, I'm going to help raise my granddaughter.
Yeah.
Like that is
'Cause they're working.
an elite decision to be able to make, and it should not be, because anybody who has a kid should have generous parental leave assistance given to them through some form or another, whether it's through their workplace or whether it's through the government itself. Like, it's disgusting that we drive parents or grandparents, whoever, like this stuff should be, this is the care economy, right? This stuff should be massively invested in, and they act like it's just a choice. This goes back to his like cat ladies thing where he's like, actually no, it's just it's women who choose to go out and get a job instead of having kids. It's like a lot of times they go to get those jobs because they want to support themselves and pay fucking rent, and then maybe if they get those hierarchy of needs taken care of, then they'll start looking at reproduction, right? Like this is a purely rich person's approach to this topic.
Yeah, I mean, most people aren't lucky enough to be able to take a sabbatical from their, I would assume, tenured or tenure track position at a university and be able to just go back after a year and step back into that position as though nothing has happened. Like, it's not just, he's right. It's not just the cost, the actual like lost wages that you theoretically incur when you leave your job. For a lot of people, it just means that suddenly that promotion you were on track for, suddenly that new raise you were going to get just takes a back seat, and you become a year, a year behind where you would have been. A lot of people have to help. It's not enough to raise a family on one income anymore. I'm sure a lot of like misogynists would say that's because women are in the workplace in the first place, and that drives down wages. But simply, it's just not enough to have one person in the family working anymore, which childcare is so expensive in some cases, people are forced to drop out of the workplace to take care of their kids because it does actually make more economic sense to drop out of the workplace, even if it means you're still unable to get by very comfortably on one earner household. So it's just totally out of touch. It's out of touch. I think it's just, rooted in the kind of natalism that Peter Thiel is famous for promoting, this idea that women should be at home and, there should be this kind of like
barefoot in the kitchen,
traditional family unit that that allows for that to be case. But our economic situation in the United States of America just does not allow for that anymore. And they're not in favor of putting forward any policies like his, antagonism towards the child tax credit that would allow people to do that.
Or, for that matter, lowering the retirement age, because the Republicans right now are talking about raising the time when you're eligible, which is a cut, by the way, to Medicare, raising the eligibility a few years so that you have to work for longer. So what's about this like pro-grandparents being in your children's lives policy that we're talking about here? And like, what if you live in a different state from your grandparents? I mean, that's what if
and why would you do that? Because you had to do it because that's where the employment opportunities were. Which Ben Shapiro says, like, oh yeah, you're behind, go move someplace, or leave all your friends and family fucking hind, and then work for a capitalist because that's the place where the cost of living and the employment opportunity matches up. Forget any social considerations.
Hey folks, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and check out our daily show. We do it every day at 12 p.m. Eastern for about 2.5 hours. We even take phone calls. You should check that out.